fellow Americans.
What do you have to say about dictators of countries like Indonesia, who we sell weapons to, yet they are slaughtering people in East Timor? What do you have to say about Israel, who is slaughtering Palestinians, who impose martial law? What do you have to say about that? Those are our allies. Why do we sell weapons to these countries? Why do we support them? Why do we bomb Iraq when it commits similar problems?
There are various examples of things that are not right in this world, and the United States is trying. I really am surprised that people feel that it is necessary to defend the rights of Saddam Hussein, when what we ought to be thinking about is how to make sure that he does not use weapons of mass destruction.
I'd like to...
Who are shouting, just a moment.
I'm not defending him in the least. What I am saying is that there needs to be consistent application of U.S. foreign policy. We cannot support people who are committing the same violations because they are political allies. That is not acceptable. We cannot violate UN resolutions when it is convenient to us. You're not answering my question, Madam Albright.
You briefed the press, did you not, when you were there?
Well, I had several jobs. One of my jobs was that of analyst. I also was an interrogator and indeed briefed the press when we, the CIA, wanted to circulate disinformation on a particular issue. Disinformation is not necessarily a lie. It may be a half-truth. And we would pick out a journalist. I would go do the briefing and hope that he would put the information in print.
What was your percentage of success?
We were pretty successful in planning information of a rather rarefied nature. For instance, if we wanted to get across to the American public that the North Vietnamese were building up their force structure in South Vietnam, I would go to a journalist and advise him that in the past 6 months, X number of North Vietnamese forces had come down the Ho Chi Minh Trail system through southern Laos. Now, there is no way a journalist can check that information. That's data derived from radio intercepts, spy in the sky photography. So either he goes with the information or he doesn't, and ordinarily or usually the journalist would go with it because it looked like some kind of exclusive. Go after these gentlemen. I would be directed to cultivate them, to spend time with them at the Caravel Hotel or the Continental Hotel, to socialize with them, and slowly but surely to try to gain their confidence by dolloping out valid information which was true. And then I would drop into a conversation the data that we wanted to get across, which might not be true. One piece of data, for instance, that we managed to plan in the New Yorker magazine had to do with a supposed North Vietnamese effort in 1973 to develop airfields along the border of South Vietnam. The reason we wanted to plant this information was that we were trying to persuade the U.S. Congress that Saigon should continue to get a great deal of aid, and that the North Vietnamese were the chief violators of the ceasefire accord. That was printed in the New Yorker magazine under the byline of Robert Chaplin, as indeed was a great deal of such information which we tried to circulate.
Frank, a two-part question. what were the objectives or what was the objective of the CIA? What about the moral implications of what you were doing in feeding this information? Did the objective override the moral implications, moral problems?
Well, the objective of the agency in general is to generate intelligence and get it back to Washington, to get at the truth and make sure the policymakers understand it. When you plant disinformation, you are diverging from that objective, and I think probably in retrospect, it was very counterproductive. I am, as an ex-CIA agent, opposed to the disinformation activities in which I was involved. I admit that I was involved, and I think it served no useful purpose. Propagandizing the American public or Congress is not the CIA's job. As to the morality of what the CIA was doing or that particular activity, the war was a very relative thing. It was a relativist environment, and morality seldom came into play when you were operating in the field. In my estimation, a CIA man should be amoral. That may sound pretty shocking to somebody, but what if my morality were that of a Nazi or agent, if you will? You wouldn't want me to be your intelligence officer. Keep the morals out of intelligence. Keep the truth in, and stay away from disinformation.
It would have been more appropriate for Mr. Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada, to address this House according to Article 144, an article which was specifically designed to debate violations of human rights, democracy, and the rule of law, which is clearly the case with Mr. Trudeau. Then again, a Prime Minister who openly admires the Chinese basic dictatorship, who tramples on fundamental rights by persecuting and criminalizing his own citizens as terrorists just because they dared to stand up to his perverted concept of democracy, should not be allowed to speak in this House at all. Mr. Trudeau, you are a disgrace for any democracy. Please spare us your presence. Thank you.
And it might sound radical, colleagues, but the answer to war is not more war, it's peace. And peace isn't delivered by the barrel of a gun. It's delivered by diplomacy, by dialogue. You can wish away your continent's history, but we share a continent with Russia. We will sit down with Russia. There will be a negotiated peace, and this organisation should be promoting it earlier rather than delaying it and making sure that more Ukrainians die. Your feigning of sympathy rings hollow. It makes me sick, to be honest with you.
Is the US a functioning democracy? Well, let's have a look at it. It costs $2 billion to become president. They're 25% of the total prisoners in the world. They spend over $800 billion a year on arms, which is more than most of the world put together. They've been at war for 250 years since their state was formed 275 years ago. But they can't afford universal health care. They can't afford the $1.7 trillion debt forgiveness for students. They can't afford a programme for the 17 million children that go to bed hungry. Is this a functioning democracy? What's your idea of a democracy?
We become involved when disinformation poses a threat to the security of our country. It is when there's a connectivity to a threat to our country. It could be a threat, a connectivity to violence. And what this working group does, is precisely what I would think you would want it to do, which is to take a look at the work, the disinformation work that our department has done, and ask the following questions. Do we have policies? Do we have guardrails Do we have
But
standards
here's the
to
problem.
ensure-
We can't
I mean,
even
this
agree.
is
We can't even
extremely-
agree what disinformation is.
This is-
You
well-
can't even agree that it was disinformation, that the Russians fed information to the Steele dossier. If you can't agree to that, how are we ever going to come to an agreement on what is disinformation so you can police it on social media?
Senator, I have 2 points, if I may finish. Number one, that what this office, what this working group does, because it's not an office, what this working group does is ensure that there are guardrails, definitions, standards to make sure that the free speech rights, the civil rights, civil liberties, and privacy rights of individuals.
So
are
do you
not
think
impinged.
do you think
Number
COVID
one.
do you think
And number
COVID do you think
two,
COVID
if I may.
do you think COVID disinformation threatens our national security?
And number two, if I may, Senator, and number two, is it your proposition that when the cartels spread disinformation with respect to our immigration policies to try to lure vulnerable migrants to our border illegally?
I think you've got no idea what disinformation is, and I don't think the government's capable of it. Do you know who the greatest propagator of disinformation in the history of the world is? The U.S. government. Are you familiar with McNamara, the Pentagon Papers? Are you familiar with George W. Bush and the weapons of mass destruction? Are you familiar with Iran-Contra? I mean, think of all the debates and disputes we've had over the last 50 years in our country. We work them out by debating them. We don't work them out by the government being the arbiter. I don't want you guardrails. I want you to have nothing to do with speech. You think we can't determine, speech by traffickers is disinformation? You think the American people are so stupid they need you to tell them what the truth is? You can't even admit what the truth is with the Steele dossier. I don't trust government to figure out what the truth is. Government is largely disseminating disinformation.
You would know this this is a bit of an aside, but in terms of how you think about problem sets, when I was a cadet, what's the cadet motto at West Point? You will not lie, cheat, or steal, or tolerate those who do. I was the CIA director. We lied, we cheated, we stole. It was like we had entire training courses.
We had a good discussion on ensuring global energy security and adequate oil supplies to support global economic growth, and that will begin shortly. I'm doing all I can to increase the supply for the United States of America, which I expect to happen. The Saudis share that urgency, and based on our discussions today, I expect we'll see further steps in the coming weeks.
Are you worried about
One of the hopeful things that I've discovered is that nearly every war that has started in the past 50 years has been a result of media lies. The media could have stopped it if they had searched deep enough. If they hadn't reprinted government propaganda, they could have stopped it. But what does that mean? Well, that means basically populations don't like wars. And populations have to be fooled into wars. Populations don't willingly and with open eyes go into a war. So if we have a good media environment, then we'll also have a peaceful environment.
You killed a million people in Iraq.
That is a separate...
You killed a million people in Iraq. It's incredible that you have the brass neck to be sitting here now urging another Iraq war
George,
after
if
what
I
you've
was
already
still in
done.
Parliament,
I can no longer remain in today's Democratic Party that's under the complete control of an elitist cabal of warmongers who are driven by cowardly wokeness, who divide us by racializing every issue and stoking anti-white racism, who actively work to undermine our God-given freedoms that are enshrined in our Constitution, who are hostile to people of faith and spirituality, who demonize the police but protect criminals at the expense of law-abiding Americans, who believe in open borders, who weaponize the national security state to go after their political opponents, and above all, who are dragging us ever closer to nuclear war. Now, I believe in a government that's of the people, by the people, and for the people. Unfortunately, today's Democratic Party does not. Instead, it stands for a government that is of, by, and for the powerful elite. Now, I'm calling on my fellow common sense, independent-minded Democrats to join me in leaving the Democratic Party. If you can no longer stomach the direction that the so-called woke Democratic Party ideologues are taking our country, then I invite you to join me.
Let me ask you a question. Do you think you should be the one to be able to decide when to pull the trigger?
No, sir.
Isn't that what this is about? If you adopt the position that any time you are denied, your particular, and there's 4 groups out there, and inspectors, you're the group you headed, anytime you are denied, that ipso facto requires the United States and the Security Council to act on what they said they would do, which is to use whatever means necessary to take on Saddam Hussein so you can get into that particular facility. Is that not correct? Is that not your position?
Mr. Senator, I have a job to do, or I had a job to do, and that was to disarm Iraq in accordance with the provisions of relevant resolutions.
With all due respect, I'm not trying to be confrontational. I'm trying to get this as clear as I can. I really mean this now. You have an absolute logic. You put together a very tight syllogism here. You have indicated that your job is to disarm. The only way you can disarm is to have access. The only way you can have access is either with permission on the part of Iraq, or if denied, forced access, right?
Compelled access.
Compelled. Yes. Well, okay, compelled. You sound like the lawyer and I sound like the military guy. I mean, compelled, where I come from, when my old man said you're compelled, it meant I was forced. I mean, it was a real simple proposition. It wasn't much to debate. Now, there is a clear logic to that. And that's what I mean when I say I respect your position. But that means that whenever you choose a target that warrants inspection and you are denied, that ipso facto, at that moment, the only way your position can be satisfied or sustained is if the UN Security Council or the United States, acting unilaterally, uses force to guarantee access. Is not that true?
Yes, sir.
Now, that means that you get to choose the time and place when we would use force, if we use force.
No, sir.
Of course you do. If you choose the site and it's denied.
And we coordinate with the member states to include the United States.
Exactly.
And prior to us going in, we have their agreement that this indeed is an inspection worth doing.
Okay, inspection worth doing, everybody's agreed it's worth doing, and it gets stopped.
Yes, sir.
At that moment, we're an automatic pilot as far as you're concerned. Period. No ifs, ands, or buts. Now, I respect that. But now, it seems to me the Secretary of State might have a slightly different problem. Secretary of State might be sitting there and saying, now look over there on that side. Now, I remember so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so, and the 12 people on this side, they're all the ones that said they didn't want to use force. Now, I'm going to have to go tell the president now that we should, or Secretary Cohen, unleash whatever it takes to get it done. And our military assessment is the same as the majors. The major's assessment is, privately held but publicly acknowledged later, that airstrikes alone aren't going to do this. Saddam's not going to cave on this. So, now here's the deal. I recommended the president have at it and let the chips fall where they may. A reasonable position for the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of State to take. But I respectfully suggest, Major, I respectfully suggest they have a responsibility slightly above your pay grade. Slightly above your pay grade. To decide whether or not to take the nation to war alone, or to take the nation to war partway, or to take the nation to war halfway. That's a real tough decision. That's why they get paid the big bucks. That's why they get the limos and you don't. I mean this sincerely. I'm not trying to be flip, because I think, and that's why I said at the outset, the reason why I'm glad you did what you did, we should come to our milk. We should make a decision. But in terms of whether the Secretary of State has no more to consider than you do as the arms inspector. You didn't get in, didn't get my job done, get me in. Period. You made the deal, right? That's the deal. A deal's a deal. Get me in. Scott Ritter, I'm ready to go. It's not how it works. Now, maybe it should work that way. But wouldn't you acknowledge that if you were President of the United States or the Secretary of State, you'd sit there and say, now, okay, old Scotty boy didn't get in. We said he should get in. We want him to get in. It's important that he does get in. They're not going to let him in, so what are we going to do now? We know that France and Russia aren't going to be with us. We're quite confident China's not. We've already run those traps. They're not there. We're not sure where the United States Senate is, but have at it, boys. Go get them. And by the way, Scott and the boys say air power's not enough. I think it's a legitimate debate, Major. I think it's a legitimate debate. But I don't think we should be putting it in the context of, you have somebody up there at state saying, look, how can we weasel out of this agreement? We want to let this guy out there hanging. We're not this. It's a very practical political decision. Same kind of decision General Powell made. Same kind of decision President Bush made. Every president, every Secretary of State has to do it. Like I said, they get paid more than you. Their job's a hell of a lot more complicated than yours. They may have made the wrong decision, and you brought it to light. We should address it. We should say straight up where we are, and we should do it. And for that, I thank you. But it's above your pay grade.
Well, one of the four principal functions of the CIA is to gather intelligence and ideally forward it to the president, the users of information, the policymakers, as they say. There are other functions, however, some of them more legitimate than others. One is to run secret wars, the covert action that's written and talked about so much, like what's happening in Nicaragua today from Honduras. Another thing is to disseminate propaganda to influence people's minds, and this is a major function of the CIA. And unfortunately, of course, it overlaps into the gathering of information. You have contact with a journalist, you will give him true stories, you'll get information from him, you'll also give him false stories. For example, in my war, the Angola war that I helped to manage, 1/3 of my staff was propaganda. Ironically, it's called covert action inside the CIA. Outside, that means the violent part. I had propagandists all over the world, principally in London, Kinshasa, and Zambia. We would take stories which we would write and put them in the Zambia Time, and then pull them out and send them to a journalist on our payroll in Europe. But his cover story, you see, would be that he had gotten them from his stringer in Lusaka, who had gotten them from the Zambia Time. We had the complicity of the government of Zambia, Kenneth Kaunda, if you will, to put these false stories into his newspapers. But after that point, the journalists, Reuters and AFP, the management was not witting of it. Now, our contact man in Europe was, and we pumped just dozens of stories about Cuban atrocities, Cuban rapists. In one case, we had the Cuban rapists caught and tried by the Ovimbundu maidens who had been their victims, and then we ran photographs that made almost every newspaper in the country of the Cubans being executed by the Ovimbunda women who supposedly had been their victims.
These were fake photos?
Oh, absolutely. We didn't know of one single atrocity committed by the Cubans. It was pure, raw, false propaganda to create an illusion of communists, eating babies for breakfast and that sort of totally false propaganda.
The only reason that I'm allowed to ask you this question is because today the federal court ruled that the government doesn't have the right to determine who is or is not a journalist. This is the second election in a row that the court had to overturn your government. Do you still insist on being able to make that decision, and why?
First of all, questions around accreditation were handled by the press gallery and the consortium of networks who have strong perspectives on quality journalism and the important information that is shared with Canadians. The reality is organizations like yours that continue to spread misinformation and disinformation on the science around vaccines, around how we're going to actually get through this pandemic and be there for each other and keep our kids safe, is part of why we're seeing such unfortunate anger and lack of understanding of basic science. And quite frankly, I won't call it a media organization, your group of individuals need to take accountability for some of the polarization that we're seeing in this country. And I think Canadians are cluing into the fact that there is a really important decision we take about the kind of country we want to see. And I salute all extraordinary hardworking journalists that put science and facts at the heart of what they do and ask me tough questions every day, but make sure that they are educating and informing Canadians from a broad range of perspectives, which is the last thing that you guys do.
Whatever our hopes may be for the future, for reducing this threat or living with it, there is no escaping either the gravity or the totality of its challenge to our survival and to our security. A challenge that confronts us in unaccustomed ways in every sphere of human activity. This deadly challenge imposes upon our society two requirements of direct concern, both to the press and to the President. Two requirements that may seem almost contradictory in tone, but which must be reconciled and fulfilled if we are to meet this national peril. I refer first to the need for far greater public information, and second, to the need for far greater official secrecy. The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control. And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know.
Welcome, everybody, to Redacted on this Tuesday. So glad to see all of you. I'm Clayton Morris.
I'm Natalie Morris.
And on this show, we cover the stories the mainstream media largely ignores. And we're going to look tonight at what is going on in Ukraine as it relates to the amount of money that the Biden administration continues to send. They basically, lifted up the seat cushions underneath their couch, and they're like, oh, hey, here's billions more that we just had sitting aside. We're going to send that to you. But we're also going to look at how America goes to war and how many war dead are caused because of U.S. endless wars. We're going to run down the numbers for you. It's really, really troubling, and we should all demand better. We should all demand an absolute change from our government.
Plus, more and more states are passing laws to end what is colloquially known. That didn't come out.
I can never say that word. I've given up trying to say that word.
Known as gender affirming care, which is a misnomer because usually what they mean by gender affirming care is unproven medical treatments.
And child mutilation.
Yes. And so Nebraska has become another state to put that on the books to make sure that that does not happen.
We're also going to look at the 2024 election, and will it be rigged? Is this something that will not? I'm going to ask you guys right now. Well, maybe we can take a poll here. Do you think that the 2024 election will be free and fair, and that there will be no interference? And I'm not even worried about like the fake Russian interference, which has now been totally disproven. What we're talking about is interference from the deep state. Let us know your thoughts on that, because we're going to deep dive this on whether or not the 2024 election will in fact be free and fair or rigged. Let us know. Redacted starts right now. That's right. 7 rank Spies in our Rumble chat says the next election won't be fair. Let us know in the chat what you guys think. Annie says it'll be rigged, not a chance. Lebanese or Scrooge. That's my favorite screen name of the afternoon. Lebanese or Scrooge says not a chance. Let us know. And while you're in there and you're pressing buttons in there, go ahead and please subscribe to the channel. Just hit that subscribe button. When you subscribe, your name pops up here on the big board. On the big Redacted board.
And we're going to tell you another thing.
I started a poll, by the way.
Oh, you
good.
did?
What is the poll? The poll is, well, just the question I just asked. Yeah, the question. Do you think the 2024 elections will be free and fair? So you can vote on that poll. That's on our YouTube channel. We have that. Does Rumble have a polling option yet?
They do not. They do not.
Come on, Rumble. Let's get it. We got to get it, man.
All right. Well, here's another thing you can subscribe to, which is our newsletter. And that also is free. You go to redacted.inc, put in your email address, and you'll get a daily newsletter. It comes every single day. It features 3 or 4 stories in some more substance with a lot of links so you can go and see for yourself if what we are telling you is legit or not. We try really hard to make sure that you can find out for yourself, as Morrissey says, and also other tidbits, other fun talking points. Again, it's sort of a companion piece to this show so that you have what we are saying in writing and you can archive it yourself. I imagine if you had read all of our newsletters in the last, 2 years or so, you'd have a really interesting story to tell and a good archive of things because...
Yeah. You'd have a really good archive of really good news. Like we go through, we have a folio, or we have an archive of all of like our links and resources for this show and articles that we then turn into PDFs, because you know how the internet likes to make things disappear on a regular basis and hide content from you. So yeah, I imagine the archive from the newsletter would be really valuable at some point. Go ahead, Philip.
Yeah, I've got 2 terabytes, almost 2 terabytes of just footage from this show on my computer. I just sit on it.
And it's funny, like, you try to go and find a particular article and now it's been revised or updated, or the Washington Post has deleted a whole paragraph. Right. And, so you got to stay on top of this stuff. So that's why we have like a massive archive of information. All right. So please subscribe to the channel. We've got a lot of news to get to. And tonight we're going to start with the war.
All right. Well, the United States has just found an additional $3 billion to send to Ukraine. They say that it was an accounting error that happened when they overestimated the value of aid being sent to Ukraine. The U.S. military has a big problem with accounting, and I'm going to lay this out for you, and it will blow your mind, because if you ran your personal finances this way, you would be in bankruptcy court every year. I know that's not possible because...
Right.
But you know what I mean. Now, here is National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan just this week being asked about this mysterious $3 billion that showed up on CNN. Watch.
The U.S. has at least $3 billion that it didn't know it had that it can use for Ukraine aid. That's a hell of an accounting error, and it provides a lot of fodder to critics of U.S. aid to Ukraine and critics who say there's not enough oversight going on. Are you concerned about this accounting error?
Well, one thing I just want to make clear, that is not money that went out the door and disappeared. That is not a waste of that $3 billion. It is simply a tally of how much military equipment we have given them. And the way that the Pentagon was counting it was, what's the replacement cost for the equipment we provide, rather than just the actual cost of that equipment. Once you make that adjustment, it turns out we have an additional $3 billion that we can spend to provide even more weapons to Ukraine. And at the end of the day, not one penny of U.S. dollars will have gone missing or have been misallocated. It will all be provided in the form of equipment to Ukraine on the battlefield.
Okay, now just a second. If they are saying we can only afford X amount, right, and each piece of equipment has a dollar value, what they're saying is we thought we sent X, but we actually sent Y, but we're all going to be okay. It doesn't work out that way. As we have later on, we have a whistleblower who was a Pentagon advisor saying what that means is you're sending Marines with guns without bullets, basically. Like you're sending people out in a more dangerous situation because they are not equipped, because we literally can't count. That's what they're saying. So this is what they're calling just an accounting error. Like, you know, they took the blue book value of the car versus the insurance value. Sabrina Singh, the spokesperson for the defense secretary, had this to say about it to Fox News, saying the department discovered inconsistencies in equipment valuation for Ukraine during an oversight process of presidential drawdown packages. In some cases, replacement cost rather than net book value was used, therefore overestimating the value of the equipment drawn from U.S. stocks. This overvaluation has not constrained our support to Ukraine, nor impacted our ability to flow capabilities to the battlefield. So this doesn't mean now that the U.S. will not send more. It means that the U.S. has already sent more. But who cares? It's not like the U.S. will audit itself. If they did, they would fail their own internal audit process. Now, remember this sort of thing about like valuing assets is something that the New York State Attorney General is going after Donald Trump for. Like you can't value assets one way for one person and then higher for your taxes or lower for an appraisal, right? Or the other way around, I think is what he did. But that's what the U.S. is doing on the battlefield. Now, this could have been prevented if Senator Rand Paul had his way. Remember, this was last May, 1 year ago from today. He asked Congress for an independent auditor, and they blew him off.
So I act to modify the bill to allow for a special inspector general. This would be the inspector general that's been overseeing the waste in Afghanistan and has done a great job.
So we wouldn't have this accounting error if we had this person, but we don't. So the U.S. is going to just keep sending weapons, and Russia will keep making kindling out of them like they did today. Today, Russia said their forces destroyed Ukrainian artillery guns in Kherson. This is another weapon stock that, on top of the weapon stock that they destroyed last week, this is a Soviet-era tank that had been in their coffers. I mean, it's not even new equipment. They're just going and destroying everything. And will the U.S. open their wallet for more? Well, yes, they will, because there's profit there. This week, Pentagon insiders are warning about price gouging And a former contractor at the Defense Department, Shay Assad, who is now retired after 40 years of service, went on 60 Minutes and said this. Now, I can't play you the clips because YouTube is very particular about copyright for 60 Minutes.
No, 60 Minutes is particular about it. If you play a 60 Minutes clip, they take your whole video down. So we cannot play a 60 Minutes clip here.
But to 60 Minutes credit, they actually said that they did a 6-month investigation and found so much price gouging by military weapons providers that it's astronomical. Look at just this summary, and then I'm going to show you a lot more. It says, in 1991, before defense contractors consolidated, shoulder-fired Stinger missiles cost $25,000. Now the sole supplier charges more than $400,000 apiece, making it costly to replace each missile in Ukraine. Now, I would argue then don't send anymore because they're just getting blown up, and maybe we could do peace talks instead. But the point here, never do they mention peace in this. Their point here is that it's inflation and then some. Go ahead, David.
Well, and they're caring to think about this money. They're like, oh, this is a big deal, but we're going to make it right. But they're not even saying anything about the fact that less than 30% even makes it where it's going. That doesn't matter.
Yeah. Now, this whistleblower, he says the gouging that takes place is unconscionable. No matter who they are, no matter what the company is, they need to be held accountable. And right now that accountability system is broken inside the Department of Defense. Again, we did have a request for an audit by Rand Paul, and that was sort of laughed off as if, the headlines were, he's holding up aid to Ukraine. Now, the expert who spoke to 60 Minutes, though, he's saying, again, that this is the equivalent of not giving a Marine enough bullets to put in his clip because the price is inflated. They cannot actually pay for enough that they need. So this is a death sentence because you can only buy so many things at this high price. Here's this expert here. What he's showing, I know it's hard to see there, is what he calls an oil switch. It looks just like a cord, right? He says NASA used to buy these oil switches for $300. Now the U.S. government buys them at $10,000 each. $300, and now they send a bill for $10,000, and the United States doesn't push back and says, okay, sure. Here are a couple other examples that they gave. For instance, Lockheed and Boeing were found to be making almost a 40% profit when selling PAC-3 missiles to the U.S. government. Over a 7-year period, the companies made hundreds of billions of dollars on the deals. He says, based on what they actually made, we would have received an entire year's worth of missiles for free. And there's already a new contract negotiated for $550 million. Raytheon was also accused of making unacceptable profits from the Patriot air defense system by exaggerating the cost and time involved to build the radar equipment. A Raytheon spokesperson told 60 Minutes that they're working to equitably resolve the dispute. While the CEO informed investors in 2021 that the company planned to set aside $290 million for profitable liability. Now, not only that, they make the case, and this is amazing, that the military doesn't own the software that a lot of this machinery runs on. So when it needs an upgrade, we pay billions of dollars for that, or millions of dollars, whatever the case, because he said when that equipment was bought, the military didn't really think to say, well, when we need to upgrade it or when we need to own this data or what have you. They just didn't make any negotiations for the software. So they have to circle back around and wait for those programming upgrades, which is kind of amazing when you think about the fact that the United States pays billions actually, for software bugs that either they can exploit or keep their enemies for exploiting. They're called 0 days. When a hacker finds a 0 day, they put it on the black market, and various defense departments buy it up. So the NSA could be buying a 0 day either to exploit it or to keep it off the market. And then also the CIA will buy the same 0 day. So the United States does buy software or software bugs. They just don't buy it for their weapons machinery. They just don't need it.
And I wonder if Microsoft makes any money off of that. I wonder.
Well, we already know that they do, right? We already know. First of all, we already know that they're making a lot of money supporting the infrastructure and in Ukraine. We already know that. We reported that here on the show.
Yeah.
And then when you contrast that with what is Russia spending right now, And where is that money going? There's sort of Western media outlet spin about how much money is coming out of there.
Yeah.
The one number, though, that we can actually point to from the Russian Ministry of Defense, where they said they would spend, the Russian Ministry of Finance, reported that by the end of the year, by the end of this past year, 2022 into 2023, that they would increase their spending by about 31%. So that's about $57 billion US dollars to about $74 billion US dollars, that 30% increase, which is, think about that, the fraction of what the United States has spent. The United States alone has spent funneling into Ukraine.
Right. Well, when you think about it, the Pentagon budget is $842 billion, the biggest ever.
Although I saw reports that it's actually over $1 trillion now.
Well, right, because you did that great piece not too long ago when you looked at what was outside of the defense budget, which is just being contracted out. And you can see that every single day on, what was it, the Department of Defense website
Department
or
of
something.
Defense website,
And those things, those contracted jobs are usually not inside of the normal defense budget. But if we're just kind of pretending that that number is real, $842 billion, fully half of it will go to defense contractors. And they do seem very much the Stark Industries archetype of just, like, let's make the weapons, make a ton of money, and, inflate the price because the U.S. taxpayer will pay for it. Now, this person, this contractor who spoke to 60 Minutes, his last name is Assad, not to be confused with the president of Syria. He tried to get an investigation launched, but he was ignored. He said that, it wasn't always like that. And he worked in this department for 40 years. He says in the 80s, the government had a choice of where to buy weapons, and they got good deals because of competition in the marketplace. Well, now those negotiators had job cuts, and the government sort of acted in good. This is his derision. I find this extremely hard to buy. Let me know if you buy this in the chat. He says, well, the government just sort of thought we don't need those weapons price negotiators anymore. We think that the defense contractors are going to give us a good price because they always have. And so we trust them to act in good faith and set fair prices. And what do you know? They didn't. Now, the reason I don't buy that maybe is because we are post-pandemic and we have seen another time when governments have taken advantage of tragedies to award big contracts to private companies. Where have I seen this before?
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Any hint? Any, right?
Yeah.
And then transfer massive wealth to the private sector.
Right. For people that are listening and listening to the podcast version of this, the audio version, we have a podcast version of this. We're talking about, of course, biopharmaceuticals, right? So it's vaccines, the cost of vaccines.
Well, specifically this idea of leapfrogging on public fear of a tragedy.
Right.
And then awarding massive contracts to private companies.
Right.
Yes, we've seen that in the recent past during the COVID-19 pandemic.
Yeah, and I just want to say too, like, we would know this was like not a money scheme, because if it wasn't, they would make sure every damn weapon got there. We would be seeing videos like, are they just shooting these missiles and bullets willy-nilly into the sky? Because we have no propaganda coming from the Ukraine showing any Russian stuff destroyed. So it's like, where is it all going? So that should be proof that it's a money scheme, because that's all this is about. Otherwise, they would make sure that they were winning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they could they could point to our tanks are making a difference on the battlefield. This is
exactly.
They could say NATO forces helped Ukraine hold Bakhmut and then win in Bakhmut, right, and take over that town. Instead, the opposite is true. And there's no evidence. Where are the weapons? All the weapons that we see, of course, are in these warehouses that end up getting blown up when they arrive.
We see them up in smoke.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah, like I would say the majority of the videos I see that come from there, like on Reddit, there's several subreddits like dedicated to the war in Ukraine, and it's mostly drones dropping grenades, and that's like. 85% of all the videos you see are just drones dropping grenades.
Like some guy attaches a little grenade to a thing, and then they fly it out, and then they get the footage of it. Right, that's what they want. They want the video of them dropping it down into a foxhole or something like that.
Well, you sort of see. I don't know. It does feel very, again, like Jean Baudrillard, the postmodern theorist, had said in his great book, "The Gulf War Did Not Exist," is that a lot of war happens through propaganda. and you don't see people as much as you see images that are what they want you to see. This is the reality we have right now. So you see sort of like tanks stuck in the mud or people pushing and walking around, right? But yeah, there's a lot that we just don't get to see other than what is destroyed by, what is destroyed in terms of weaponry.
Right.
So let us know what you think in the chat. Is this just straight price gouging? A lot of people, they have to answer to regulators for price gouging. Why don't weapons makers? Let us know what you think.
Because it's all a money laundering scheme. That's exactly what it is.
Right.
This is, and the
do you
only
know
way,
do you know what a Veblen good is?
Yeah, a Veblen good is it's the.
Is it Veblen good or Veblen good or a Giffen good? One of those two things. It's the economic theory that the higher price something is, the more like panache it's got, the more people want it, like a Prada bag.
Yeah.
Or I don't know,
wine.
A Rolex. I suppose wine, right? And so these weapons have essentially become, like, they're not working by normal market forces. They've become a Geffen good.
And
like
then if
designer weapon.
Yeah, and then you look
tank.
at the Patriot systems. Of course, we've had many experts talking about the failure of the Patriot systems and how massive.
The chat told me, is it Geffen or Veblen? Go ahead.
Like we've talked on this show many times about the effectiveness of the Patriot systems and how effective or ineffective they are. And then you see these Kinzhal missiles, right, that they're not able to shoot down these Kinzhal missiles,
Mm-hmm.
So again, and then we're paying so much for these things from these weapons manufacturers. We're getting them from Lockheed Martin. We're getting them from General Dynamics, and we're spending just an arm and a leg to get these things. And from Raytheon, I think Raytheon does make the Patriots, if I'm not mistaken. So, and we pay so much for these things, and they just get,
They literally are designer weapons because you can pay to put stuff on them, like signs and all that stuff, to shoot them over there. Remember that? They were selling the ability to put designs on the missiles that were going over there.
You can put pictures and designs on. Yeah.
All right. And it is a Giffen good. It's a non-luxury product where demand increases as price increases.
Yeah.
So like it shouldn't happen that way, but it happens with like soy milk.
Yeah.
So
All right,
let us know what you think of that in the chat.
Well, the state of Nebraska just made it official. No more child mutilation surgeries, or what trans rights activists call gender-affirming care, under the age of 19. So give it up for the state of Nebraska. So in other words, if you want to cut off your breasts or other parts of your body at 12 years old, you need to get your parents to drive you to California or some other state that will allow you to get it done. Washington State, is Washington able to do that? Oregon, I'm sure, is probably able to do that. The measure passed the legislature last Friday. Interesting about Nebraska, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think from my high school civics classes, I think that Nebraska is the only, maybe I'm wrong, is the only unicameral legislature in all of the United States. Is there another one? Does anyone know? By that? Well, there's not two chambers. There's just one chamber in the Congress. There's not like a House of Representatives and a Senate. There's just one chamber. So it doesn't have to go through the House and then go to the Senate.
Oh.
There's one chamber. Is there any other? Anyway, I'm just curious about that. Anyway, the measure passed the unicameral legislature last week, and it was just signed by Governor Jim Pillen. Here he is. It's called the Let Them Grow Act, and it was just signed. There he is holding a baby to say, like, let our children grow up. Let our children grow up to be who they will be, without any interference by politics or big pharmaceutical companies who are heaping all sorts of problems onto our children. Here he is after the signing.
LB 574.
Go ahead.
74 steps towards making sure our kids aren't making harmful decisions, and that they're going to regret for the rest of their life, and that they're duped by outside voices. It's really simple. This bill protects our kids, saves babies. Because of the work of our courageous conservative leaders across our state, I'll be signing this bill to allow our kids to grow and thrive in the state of Nebraska. We all agree our kids are our future, and we never let a kid behind. This lets our kids be kids inside and outside mom's wombs.
So pretty big moment. Then they got a big round of applause for that. But this did not happen without drama. On Friday, people who are in favor of child mutilations held protests at the Nebraska State Capitol building. Here's just some of this, some of the interactions. You can watch this. You can go ahead and play that. So they're saying bans off all bodies is what they're saying here. Bans off all bodies.
What they're failing to notice is that in all academic research, about 80 to 90% of people with gender dysphoria have it resolved by puberty, by the end of puberty, which means that puberty is usually the cure for gender dysphoria. And so what pharmaceutical and medical biopharmaceutical industries are doing is blocking the cure to gender dysphoria.
And they know this.
By medicalizing a body and making themselves a forever client.
Yeah.
And so, they're taking medicine and they're blocking what is the cure. And now they've got, and speaking of price gouging, what we just talked about in the other segment, again, medical insurance companies are charging twice what these drugs are worth on the market when they're used for other things such as cancer.
Hioika Mike in our chat says, leave our kids alone, you evil ghouls. Yes, I couldn't agree with you more. David, go ahead.
Yeah, I did a video recently about how on TikTok, clinics that do this gender affirming care are targeting kids and saying you're going to feel better when you're in the right body, like you were born in the wrong body. Like it's just it's sick because they're like literally marketing this to people.
Yeah, they're
leeches.
It's
the pharmaceutical industry.
Absolutely. Yes, I want everyone to remember as I'm doing this segment, it's the biopharmaceutical complex is behind this, guys. Follow the money. Follow the money.
And there is no research that shows that medicalizing the body and taking pharmaceuticals and surgery actually cures dysphoria. That dysphoria persists. You just now have a mutilated body, and which is incredibly sad.
So they took to social media. It wasn't just there showing up at the legislature, but a lot of people took to social media to tell us how surgeries for kids would save lives and why you should oppose this bill. Listen.
Are you kidding me? After failing to pass a 6-week abortion ban, Nebraska lawmakers are trying to take a ban on gender-affirming care for trans youth and slap on amendments that would restrict abortion access, all at the last minute. It's unprecedented to take a bill that died and have it come back as an amendment to another bill right before it's supposed to pass. Did I mention that they're doing this without any public input? It's totally how a democracy is supposed to work. Last night during debate, Nebraska senators broke precedent to push this bill forward. If enacted, LB 574 would ban abortion at around 12 weeks of pregnancy and ban life-saving, gender-affirming care for trans youth. These anti-abortion lawmakers are grasping at straws. They're trying to crush our rights and can't even do it in a way that honors the democratic process. Let's get one thing straight. Resurrecting an abortion ban by bundling it into a package of restrictions on trans rights is egregious, cowardly, and pathetic. Banning abortion at any stage of pregnancy denies a person the fundamental right to control their own body. No ban is acceptable. Not now, not ever. Only one senator needs to change their vote to kill this bill. Just one more vote to let Nebraskans keep control over their own bodies. Contact your senator today and ask them to vote no on LB 574.
So, one of the things that he said there that is totally wrong, of course, is that they're voting on this gender affirming care that's life-saving gender affirming care.
Yes, again, they don't have data for that.
Right.
It's just another talking point, just like gender affirming. It's just something that they co-opted as language.
Yeah, this language thing also really infuriates me. And it's an old political playbook. Right, Frank Luntz wrote a book on the politics of language and how effectively using language for so many years. Democrats sucked at it. They were absolutely horrible about using language correctly. Republicans really owned this space, right? They would say things like, "We're going to call it the Clean Air Act," but it was really a rollback, of course, of all sorts of environmental protections, right? So it wasn't actually the Clean Air Act; it was the Dirty Air Act. But then you would vote against it. And people would say, look, and they would run the campaign ads. They'd be like, Natalie is against the Clean Air Act. But she's like, no, it's actually a Dirty Air Act. So they're calling it gender affirming care. And so you see all of the news articles use that tagline. They use that language, gender affirming care. What they should just replace it with is child mutilation.
Well, or just if we want to be a little bit less antagonistic, Clayton, that's not my nature. You could just call it sex change for children. Is everybody on board with sex change for children? Because when you say it like that, nobody reasonably would want that. Sex
Right.
change for children.
Yeah, I think child mutilation is more accurate because you're literally going under the knife, or you're giving them some sort of hormonal.
Well, they're not always going under the knife, and I think a large part of them don't.
But would you still
because
call it
it's
mutilation?
terrifying.
Would we still call it mutilation? Let us know in the chat if they're the
let's
hormone
also
blockers.
say that it's, that even if there's no surgery involved and your child says, okay, but I am the opposite gender than the one my chromosomal DNA tells you, right? And so then I'm going to spend all of my time trying to pass as this other gender, that's going to lead to a lifetime of anxiety. And it is generally not good for any of us, not you, not me, to hyper focus on how I am perceived in the world. That is an anxietizing place to be. As a parent, I think most of us would rather raise our kids to say, people take me as I am. I don't care if you don't like my hair. I don't care if you don't like my sweater. That's how I'm going to be. But no, we're saying to them, step into this lifestyle of passing. They will never be able to then be contributing adults in other meaningful ways if they are so hyper-focused on this.
Yeah. So,
I look at it as internal and external mutilation. I mean, the puberty blockers are doing it internally, and the surgeries are doing it externally. It's all changing kids from what they are to something they will never be.
Yeah, a lot of people in the chat saying it is mutilation. Others are saying it's child torture. You brought up a great point earlier tonight over dinner. We were talking about this. Actually, as we were cleaning the dishes, we weren't talking about this in front of the kids. But the idea that it is child abuse in many ways.
Well,
That's
what
a
I
totally
was
different
talking
story.
about was how there's a man who was breastfeeding his baby because his wife had the baby, and then he decided he was transgender woman and he wanted to try to feed the baby. So he pumped himself so full of hormones and started to produce some colostrum. Now, if you've ever nursed a baby, I've nursed 3, you know that colostrum is what comes before your milk. There's no nutrition in it, and a baby can't thrive on that. Furthermore, when a baby suckles, they are doing something that's like, it burns a lot of calories. So I had my 3rd child had a problem latching because she had this tongue problem that we needed to get worked out. So as she was nursing, she was burning more calories to nurse than she was getting from me because she was working too hard to get her milk. So she couldn't hit her birth weight for 3 weeks. She was still at birth weight. She was not gaining weight, and this was a problem. And the doctor said, don't even give her a pacifier, because if she's sucking on that, she's gonna keep losing weight until we fix this tongue tie issue. So if you think of putting a newborn infant on a male chest, they're working hard to get their milk. That's exercise for them. And the baby's only getting colostrum. That's really stinking confusing for a baby. And I think that's abusive. That is child abuse to a baby, because they're nursing and not getting nutrition. When the mom is sitting right there with all the milk, that's cruel.
It's cruel. It's child abuse. And the dude, the father who now thinks he's a woman, the only reason they're doing it is to
affirm the dad,
affirm his insecurities in life, right? So you're basically abusing the child so that he can go around dressing up as a woman. Am I wrong?
Isn't that child also getting an influx of those hormones? If they're jamming in their body, isn't there going to be a ton extra that child is getting?
Yes.
Yeah. And
yes,
why
add on
are
the
we
layer.
allowing this?
How many layers of child abuse can you get, right? You're literally depriving him of nutrition, and you're pumping him full of the same hormones that this dude is taking in order to have breasts. What kind of clown world are we living in right now? You want to see a society in decline, just look around. This is crazy. So,
if you've ever nursed a baby and you know what a conversation that is between you and the baby actually is telling you what it needs through the enzymes in its saliva, you are in a conversation with your child. And then to think that I would ever let someone else put my baby on their nipple, even if they weren't a man, I can't, as a mother, I can't abide even the thought of this. I'm so angry about it.
So for around 2 minutes and 40 seconds on Friday, this was something that is absolutely jaw-dropping to watch. So I'm going to show you a piece of video now. So this was during the debate in the Nebraska legislature. This is Nebraska State Senator Michaela Cavanaugh, a Democrat. Shocking. repeated this over and over and over again for 2 minutes. Like she had the floor. She used her time to make this statement. And I want to unpack something. We're going to watch her make this statement. Here's Michaela Cavanaugh about transgender people being here. Watch.
Senator Michaela Cavanaugh, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Trans people belong here. We need trans people. We love trans people. That's what they're saying out there. They're standing in a circle in the rotunda saying that over and over again. Trans people belong here. We need trans people. We love trans people. Trans people belong here. We need trans people. We love trans people. Trans people belong here. We need trans people. We love trans people. Trans people belong here. We need trans people. We love trans people. Trans people belong here. We need trans people. We love trans people. Trans people belong here. We need trans people. We love trans people. Trans people belong here. We need trans people. We love trans people. Trans people belong here. We need trans people. We love trans people. Trans people belong here. We need trans people. We love trans people. Trans people belong here. We need trans people. We love trans people. Trans people belong here. We need trans people. We love trans people. Trans people belong here. We need trans people. We love trans people. Trans people belong here. We need trans people. We love trans people. Trans people belong here. We need trans people. We love trans people. Trans people belong here. We need trans people.
I don't like that song.
I think she needs to say I.
There's a lot of songs I like.
Belong here. I love trans people. I need trans people, because like she's saying we, and I think there's probably some people that disagree.
Oh my God. So in this situation, clearly, as people are saying in the chat, like, oh my God. Anyway, in this situation though, she stands up and uses her total time in this. I always want to follow the money when I see something like this. So I did. Who's giving her the money for this campaign? Who's giving her the money to stand up here and do this? So I looked into it. And I wanted to go through her finances, and so I decided to. Turns out she gets tens of thousands of dollars from the healthcare industry. I know that's shocking to you, including Planned Parenthood Advocates of Nebraska. Now, Planned Parenthood Advocates of Nebraska, I learned, is a subsidiary of a more umbrella organization for Planned Parenthood in the Midwest, which gets millions of dollars, by the way, millions of dollars from you, the taxpayers.
And are one of the largest distributors of synthetic hormones.
Exactly. So she's getting money directly from the people, the pill pushers. She's getting money directly from the healthcare industry. So that's the website. Here she is. Here, and you want to track the money yourself, you can do this. You can go right to the website here, and I'll have links to this in the description below if you want to go there. And you can read all about Michaela Cavanaugh's finances, and you can see the itemized contributions, the in-state, out-of-state, unknown state, party committee money, all the way down the line, the amount of money that she gets from trial attorneys, which is a lot of money she gets from trial attorneys, as well as the healthcare industry. And if you go to Planned Parenthood's website, it goes both ways. So you can go to their website, the Planned Parenthood website of Nebraska. This is again a subsidiary of the Midwest Planned Parenthood conglomerate or whatever. They feature her prominently on their website as one of the top people that they endorse. There she is in red, right there on their website under the People We Endorse section, right on Planned Parenthood's website. We endorse her. And if you read the mission statement from Planned Parenthood on the Planned Parenthood of Nebraska website, their mission statement as an organization, a 501c4 organization, mobilizes supporters of all parties to protect, promote, and expand access to sexual and reproductive health care and fact-based, medically accurate sexuality education. And if you do a deeper dive into this, you can read, this is fascinating. This is on Planned Parenthood's website. All people have a right to high-quality, non-judgmental, affordable health care, including the full range of sexual and reproductive health care. Access to family planning improves people's lives. Education is the foundation of a healthy community. Abortion must remain safe, legal, and accessible. And here at the bottom, efforts to protect and expand access to the ballot box, democracy, reform, LGBTQ+ equity, and safety for Black and brown communities, regardless of immigration status, and they're a top priority. They also talk about how this care for sexual health and education should be also taken care of by the government. And Nebraskans deserve affordable birth control, access to information to decide if and when and how they will become parents, as well as how they are used and for sexual, what's the word I'm looking for? Gender affirming care. Mm-hmm. And what you do to go, get access to gender affirming care or, the
medicalization of a trans body.
Right. So if you want to become trans, like this is the mission statement. This is the support. So she's taking money directly from these people.
And also, if she had anything like that's just going to irritate people, what she did. If she had anything substantive to add, like to say, okay, these are why we should accept it. This is why gender affirming care is important. And at least state something that is educational to get people on board, because what she just did does nothing.
No, it doesn't. And it ignores these sort of deeper issues of the medicalization, the continued medicalization of a body. And, then we sort of have these things, like I just mentioned, of like men thinking they should breastfeed a baby. Now, I see in the chat these comments saying not all women can nurse. Fine. All men can't nurse.
Right.
I'm comfortable saying that, right? I know that not all women can nurse. So you can give a baby a bottle. You should not be having a baby frustrated. It's so frustrating for
Give
a
him to
small
a man.
baby.
Give him to a man who's pumped full of hormones so they can get all sorts of drugs
You can
in their
even
body.
wear those little booby hanger things if you really want the experience, but you should not be having a baby trying to latch to a real nipple and trying to actually get milk that is synthetically produced from hormones.
God, what is wrong? Well, anyway, that's a rabbit hole. Anyway, let us know your thoughts on this in the chat below. Let us know your thoughts on this in the chat below. By the way, do you think, and maybe, Nebraska, just the latest state to support this and to ban this kind of craziness. So good on Nebraska. In fact, today I was doing research on this, and Planned Parenthood said today that they're already making plans to drive people from Nebraska to out of state to get things done. So Planned Parenthood is in action, and they're taking people across state lines to do what they need to do, and that's what they support. So let us know your thoughts on this.
I told you about that bill in Washington that passed, right? Like literally passed both the House and Senate. It's like, it is law.
Yeah.
That they can come from other states, and if they go to a clinic, it doesn't matter their age, they don't say any age limits, they can tell them that they want gender affirming care, and they cannot tell the parents where they are. They don't have to let the parents know. And if the parents try to find out what they've done, they don't have to tell them. And they can come from any state to have that, and the parents won't know they're even there. Jeez. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. And in Oregon, and the thing is, they do not cover detransition care. And so if you've done this to your body, you're hosed, basically. Sorry, too bad. We can't support you. We never had data to go off in the first place to do this to you. We definitely don't have data to undo it to you. So hope you like your new mutilated body because you're stuck with it, because it's very hard to get doctors to, and the state of Oregon, when they wanted to add it to their bill in order to force all insurers to pay for it, detransition care is not included. We've gone over this before.
Yes, indeed we have. All right, let us know your thoughts on this in the chat below. We got more news to get to here. We're going to be joined by investigative journalist Itana Hecht. I had a chance to sit down with her a short time ago about this new rumor department. Did you know that the federal, what is it called? The Food and Drug Administration, that was FDA, the Federal Food and Drug Administration, has a rumor control department. Oh, yeah. They want to control what you're saying and thinking online. How did this happen? When did this pop up? We're going to get to the bottom of that. We're also going to ask you the question, will the 2024 election be rigged? Wait until you hear what National Security Advisor, former Deputy National Security Advisor, KT McFarland, a good friend, KT McFarland. She is smart as a whip. I used to interview her many, many times. What she has to say about the 2024 election is jaw-dropping. You don't want to miss that. But first, speaking of milk and speaking of Moo, let's tell you about our friends over at Moo, by the way, because now you can get up to 20 free stocks right now just for opening an account with Moomoo. It's a great trading platform that lets you, there's no steep learning curve. It has a simple interface. It's easy to use, so even beginners can take advantage of the stock market in no time. I was trading some stocks this afternoon, actually, using my Moomoo app. It has powerful tools, often reserved for experienced investors, like customizable watch lists, advanced charting capabilities, and now Moomoo even has added a powerful new earnings calendar, so you don't have to hunt and peck around trying to find earnings schedules for your favorite companies. I love setting alerts on the app. So different companies that I invest in, I get alerts sent to me, and I can listen in on conference calls and things like that and see what the company is doing if I want to add a little bit more to my portfolio, or if I want to sell the stock because I don't like what the company's doing. All of that can be done right inside of Moomoo. They have zero commission trades. The app looks amazing. And again, you'll get 20 free stocks when you open up your account and make your initial deposits. And you can do that by going to our website. It's redacted.inc/Moomoo. That's MOOMOO. So redacted.inc/Moomoo to get up to 20 free stocks and trade like a pro with Moomoo. Well, did you know the Food and Drug Administration has a rumor control department? How would you like to go work for the Food and Drug Administration, their rumor control department? How long has this been around? And what rumors are they trying to control? Well, the person that broke this story, I didn't even know about this, is investigative journalist Eitana Hecht, who is the senior editor from the Daily Clout. Good to have you back on the show. Thank you so much for joining us again.
Thank you. Thank you for having me back. It's a pleasure to be here.
So how did you learn about this rumor control department? Was this something that you stumbled upon? How long has this been in place? Is this something new that the FDA is rolling out to try to combat mis or disinformation?
Well, in my opinion, they're definitely beginning to panic about what they call misinformation, just because, in my opinion, new media has been doing a fantastic job at combating the narrative coming from the FDA. But yes, I stumbled upon it totally by accident. I was scrolling my YouTube feed, and I'm actually subscribed to the FDA because I want to see what they're up to. And I see a huge boasting headline called report to the FDA rumor control department. So I clicked on it, and it was this really weird message about how the internet's going to go down and how quickly something like that can spread through WhatsApps and different platforms. And in like this boasting way, they were saying, if you see misinformation, please make sure to report it. Well, that is completely unacceptable as an American. Why is the government telling us to rat on our neighbors? This seems to be a repetitive theme. And I went to their website, fda.gov/rumor control. And sure enough, it's this whole page about how to identify misinformation, where to report it, where to gather other people who are combating misinformation like you. It's really egregious. And I personally made a little video on top of their video, just to highlight the absurdities and just try and show people what's out there and what we're up against.
Yeah, and we'll link to your article in the show description, so people can go and see your video that sort of, I don't want to say mocks, but sort of lays out on your side the facts in the website next to theirs. But I want to play their video that you stumbled upon. They produced this. I mean, this is the FDA putting out this video, basically telling us, if you see rumors out there, here's how you control it. Watch this video.
Are you prepared? The internet is going down later this week. It's going to be crazy. Find out more below.
The internet is going down later this week.
The internet is
going down.
The real truth the government refuses to tell you. Previous account banned for sharing the truth. Wait a minute, this is misinformation. You may be spreading misinformation unintentionally. Confirm the credibility of a source before contributing to the conversation. To see how FDA is addressing misinformation, check out our Rumor Control webpage.
So that's a new video that the FDA just published. I mean, publishing this recently. And of course, we made a big deal about the Disinformation Governance Board that the Department of Homeland Security was rolling out. Once all of the outrage hit about this, of course, they walked it back, and we know what happened to Nina Jankowicz as a result of it. So is this now sort of popping up in other government agencies, this idea of disinformation and how to control it?
Without a doubt. And as I think we discussed last time I was on your show, it's this much broader global censorship industrial complex. And not only are they proud of it, they're continuing on. I mean, I posted that video. My video by far got more views than theirs did, at least on YouTube. And they're continuing. Even this morning, they posted it again in a slightly different format, but the same idea about reporting to the FDA's rumor control department if you see your neighbor or friend spreading misinformation.
And so I'm curious a couple of things here. What are they deeming as mis or disinformation? Because when you think about the amount of lies, the amount of evidence that has been put out over the past few years, thanks to the FDA, and what information they have allowed to come out, what are they saying is factual information or disinformation? What are they providing red flags about that they would think are is troublesome?
Well, that's a good question, but they're very clearly still railing against the doctors who participated in the Great Barrington Declaration early on. And we all know those big COVID dissident names by now who have really been helping people throughout the pandemic. And according to the official government rumor control department, it seems that they're still aiming their sights at the COVID dissidents and really, really rallying around COVID misinformation, anything having to do with the vaccine or early treatment, ivermectin. And it just seems to be like this broader topic of misinformation, but they never actually get into the details, of course, and debate on the merits.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. They won't allow it to. So I'm curious what happens when someone files a rumor. Where does that do we know where that information goes? Let's say I'm surfing the web and I find something that I find to be, offensive, or something that goes away from my own narrative, that something about vaccines or something, and I want to flag this. I go to their rumor control department at the FDA and file a report. What happens with that report? Do we know where it goes?
No, I'm not even sure where the actual report form is, but it's like a portal of all of their different social media platforms so that they can direct you to what is absolutely correct information. And in terms of filing the rumor control report, I'm going to have an update for you on that, and I'll let you know when I do.
Great. Well, thank you for bringing.
I plan to follow that trail and see how far that goes.
Well, I would love to know. Yeah, please let us know what happens when we file a claim that we've discovered a rumor and we're reporting it to the FDA. Thank goodness, the FDA is going to be on it to save us from misinformation out there.
Right. At least Nina Jankowicz won't be there to read all the reports and punish us.
Maybe it'll be her new job. We don't know.
Maybe.
Itana Hecht from Daily Clout, thank you so much for uncovering this story, and thanks for staying on top of it for us. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Have a good day.
And she does such a great job. Really, really great with this investigative work on her part. So thank you. And meanwhile, we just got an update from the FDA. Unbelievable this afternoon. And this is from the Gateway Pundit. Here we go. FDA now recommends that healthy people aged 5 to 65 should get only one dose of the mRNA bivalent COVID vaccine. No more additional boosters required.
I wonder what data they didn't use to come up with that. Given that they came up with this idea of two vaccines.
They love not using facts.
Where did that ever come from,
they
right?
They love
and now
not
they're
using
saying
data.
One is fine.
So they were not tested on humans, only mice. The bivalent COVID-19 vaccines included a component of the original virus strain and a component of the Omicron B4-5 strains. Recall, the reformulated bivalent COVID boosters were not tested on humans, only mice.
This is true.
Yeah. So, the FDA now recommending only a single bivalent shot, mRNA shot, no longer authorized for use in the United States. The Johnson & Johnson vaccine, monovalent, Moderna and Pfizer COVID-19 vaccines are no longer authorized for use in the United States.
All right, throw those in the trash. More taxpayer dollars.
Just think, age 5, children 6 months through 5 years of age who are unvaccinated may receive a 2-dose series of the modern Moderna bivalent vaccine.
Okay.
So what?
It just occurs to me right now that in all the data that we've gone through about whether or not the efficacy of preventing the spread or vaccine injury or anything like that, I've never seen anything that explained why they decided it needed to be 2 doses. Never.
No. Have you? Does anyone?
We've been pouring through this data for 2 years.
Well, what I'm curious about is how is this still emergency use authorization? I mean, that's like, I understand, like, if a building's on fire, a firefighter because it's an emergency, they can chop down the door with an axe. If they come back 2 weeks later after they've rebuilt the building, they can't keep just coming up whenever they want to and chopping down the door with the axe. The emergency's over.
Yeah.
Right. At some point, don't they have to actually then authorize this?
Yeah, the reason is because they can't. It's not approved. So it can't be on the market because it could not get approved with the data that was released that they wanted to hide for 75 years. Now, potentially, if that data wasn't hidden, they could have gotten approved, maybe. But also, there are other things that supposedly can help, and if those things exist, they can't get emergency use either. So that's why that's still being,
Right. Yeah, if there's other things that you can literally go to the pharmacy and get that have won the Nobel Prize, you can't use those things. Can't use those things because they won't make any money for the companies.
Well, we
and if
can't.
there was proof that they worked, they can't get emergency use. That's the whole point. Like those can't work, and it can't get approved. So the only way they can put it out still is emergency use.
Unbelievable.
All right. Well, we can't say the names of those therapeutics as long as we're on YouTube. And the next story we're going to do, we're going to talk about elections. That also is not a welcomed topic on YouTube. So we're going to move platforms. So if you are watching us on YouTube, we will see you tomorrow, or you can find us over on another website. Here is the URL.
But we can tell them we are going to Rumble right now. We're going to rumble.com/redacted. That's where we're going. The stream will continue there. So we're going to continue. We have 2 more big stories we're going to do specifically on this election story and the poll that we have up on the screen. We can't leave YouTube yet because we have a big poll that we just asked you. And here is the poll. So we asked you this earlier. Do you think the 2024 elections will be free and fair? Is what the poll says. And 83% of you say no, it will not be free and fair. Almost 9,000 votes. You guys can vote right now. And maybe we'll check it we can't because we're going to shut down the YouTube stream. But anyway, so we're going to talk about that over on Rumble because we've got some really interesting information from a former deputy national security advisor about what is going to happen in this 2024 election. It's a jaw-dropping story. You don't want to miss it. So thank you to YouTube.